Well, hi there. It's good to see you, good to imagine you, Jonathan Foust here, and welcome to this webcast. Let's see, before we launch, I have the traditional thank yous and acknowledgments. First of all, thank you for being here. It's fantastic to share these practices and just to know that there's this collection of really interesting people scattered around the planet who are really drawn to these practices. It's just fantastic. And I just led a day-long retreat. We had about 75 people from all around the planet. And it is one of the magical things around moving online. So at any rate, here we are. I want to thank our producers, Glenn Harrison and Leo Gimo, for doing all they do to set up this webcast and the streaming and the editing and all that good stuff. Also to thank all those who make this Monday night extravaganza what it is. What it is, excuse me, is pollen season here in Northern Virginia. So I'm a little pollinated. I'd like to thank our mindful movement teacher and mindful dialogue leaders. The whole Monday night experience. If you're interested, 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. You can join Mindful Movement led by three very, very skillful people, not all at the same time. They take turns leading. A big thank you to Rita, Anna, and Lynn. That goes till about 7:30 Eastern Standard when we have this meditation and Dharma talk. And afterward, if you'd like to connect with some like-minded people and be skillfully guided into some conversation and sharing, you can join Mindful Dialogue with Ray Manioki and Tara Cassidy. Those links, they're all on Zoom. You can get those links on my website or on my Facebook page. So all that is there for you. And also a big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this, and to my good friends at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington in Arlington, Virginia, who have been the host of Monday Night Meditation for a long, long time. If you're interested in more resources, a monthly newsletter that gives you a summary of the talks and my all my best photography from the month, you can sign up for my mailing list, and that's on my website as well. And as always, just to let you know that this is offered freely, very much in the spirit of what's called dana, of generosity, to ensure that no one is denied access to these practices and these teachings. All of us here offer all this up freely. If you are inspired to support this, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. PayPal, Venmo, all that stuff. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And I'm just so grateful to be able to offer these practices and to support you in your practice as best I can. We're going to continue our series here on this art of inquiry, what it means to turn and explore questions that open you up to explore what's truly present. So one thing I'd like to kind of highlight before we move into our meditation is something that I mentioned in a couple of talks back, and have gotten some really wonderful requests for a little bit more on that. And that is this exploration of how you perceive the present moment. We are guided again and again to this foundation of life force and presence. When you are aware of the sensations in the body, you are here and now. The body doesn't live in the past, it doesn't live in the future. When you take the mind, which does live in the past and future, and you entrain it into the here and now, you arrive. In fact, just right now, where do you feel the breath on the inside? Notice how, as soon as you ask that question, it guides your attention to the here and now. So, I'm not going to go on here. We're going to meditate. We perceive through, in this lens of Buddhist psychology, Buddhist philosophy, through six senses, not just five, but through sight, through sound, through feeling, through touch, through smell. And then the brain is considered one of the senses because it's the processing, the cognizing function happens in the brain. But primarily where we tend to perceive is through sight and through sound and through feeling. So in this meditation, I'll be offering an invitation. Feel free to ignore me. That's completely fine with me. But what you can do is you can practice something known as labeling or noting. And that is, if you like, even right now, if you close your eyes, you might notice how this perception of here and now may show up through one of these lenses. And what you'll do is when you notice that you've moved into imagery, you'll just say, see. If you're aware of a sound, hear. And if it's a sensation that's predominant, you'll say, feel. This practice of noting or labeling is a beautiful way to entrain awareness into this very, very subtle perception of here and now in present moment awareness. So with that, if you haven't already, again, you can close your eyes and take some time to let your body move and stretch in any way that feels good. We want to kind of like set the field for this meditation. Your cell phone should be on stun and make sure you won't be disturbed. And as you're kind of settled in, as you find your posture for this time of practice, you might begin to bring your awareness to the breath. Notice where you feel the breath the most predominant on the inside right now. And I'm going to offer just a few ways that you can explore in training yourself more and more into the here and now. One of them is through this practice of coherent breathing, which is an ancient technique, but with an updated name. If you would, what you'll do for the next little while is to match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath, with no extended pause between the inhalation and the exhalation. So if you like, on the next in-breath, count slowly to the count of 4. And move right into the exhalation to the count of 4. Inhale to the count of 4. Exhale to the count of 4 and continue on your own now. And as you breathe, notice the details of all the senses inside. Now, only if it's possible, without strain, you might now lengthen the inhalation and the exhalation, counting to 5. And notice if you can also let the breath be really smooth. Smooth out the breath. And again, only if it's not creating strain. If it's possible, you might now lengthen the counting to 6. Inhaling to the count of 6. Moving directly into the exhalation to the count of 6. And for the next minute, match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath. No pause in between. Breath is smooth. Feel the effect. You might also notice if it's possible to soften even more, feel even more on the inside. Is it possible to both soften and sharpen your attention? And as you feel ready on the next out breath, let the technique fall away. Notice how deeply you can relax and how intimately you can feel the imprint, feel the effect of this conscious, willful breathing. Now, moving into a sense of ease and free flowing breath. And to deepen this exploration of intimate moment to moment presence. You might sense from the inside the crown of the head. And feel your forehead smooth. Sensing from the inside out, can you in any way soften all those little muscles around your eyes? And can you soften through the back of the head, and in particular, noting if it's possible to relax or soften the muscles along the occipital ridge, right along the base of the skull? Sensing from the inside out as you imagine or feel all the little micro expressions on your face, softening. The face relaxed, smooth, expressionless. Letting your awareness now move to the inside of your mouth. Just sensing what might soften or relax. In particular, you might notice if you can relax your tongue. Let your tongue fill your lower jaw. And can you relax the root of your tongue down into your throat as you soften the jaw, all the jaw muscles relaxing. Feel the volume of your lips. Is it possible now to feel the weight of your arms? Imagining the arms like heavy drapes hanging from your shoulders, and let your attention flow from the shoulder joints down through your elbows. Sensing from the inside out, down through your wrists. And can you sense now on the inside, the palms, the volume of your hands, fingers, and thumbs? Feel the backs of the hands. And can you feel or imagine the space between your fingers? Can you feel or imagine the space between your breastbone and your spine? The space between your navel and your spine. And can you soften or relax your lower back and the buttocks? Feel the space between your left hip joint and your right hip joint. Sensing from the inside. Feel from the hip joints down through the knees. The knees down through the ankles. The tops of the feet and the toes. The soles of the feet now and the heels. And as you sense the whole body, sense on the inside, is there anything right now that could soften or relax? You might now choose an anchor, the breath or sound, or maybe the feeling in the palms. And for this next period of time, let this be your primary doorway back to the here and now when the mind naturally wanders off. And you might feel or imagine this sense of the observer taking the seat of the witness, the one who is aware. And as you now move into your practice, you might explore this practice of noting, primarily focusing on the arising of imagery, the awareness of sound, and the awareness of feeling. And as you become aware of an image or sound or feeling, you'll note with one word for each: see, hear, and feel. This is a very intuitive process, and find your own way into this. It's very, very gentle, just simply noticing when there's an image with see, when awareness moves to sound, hear, and with sensation, feel. At any point, you can begin again, and you might explore this sense of softening, receiving the moment, noting if there's any tension built up. You might again just feel the inside of your mouth, the palms of the hands. Sensing the movement of the breath down deep in the belly. The soles of the feet and the heels. And you might refresh again the sense of the observer, the witness, noticing what's happening as it's happening. And you might direct your attention to your anchor. And then again, if you like, noting the arising of see, hear, and feel, gently noting. In these minutes remaining, could you again soften even more on the inside? What could relax right now? You may notice how the more intimately you relax, the more intimately you feel. And sensing in your own way this quality of the observer, this capacity to observe without judgment, without preference, just simply awake to what is here and awake to what is changing. And if you like, you might let the anchor drop away, let the noting or labeling fall away. And let this time be an exploration of moving from any sense of doing to an investigation into being. What could relax or soften through the body and the mind right now? Is it possible to both relax and to be aware of what is changing, and at the same time, allow things to be as they are. Noticing the flow or the stream of your experience. Deeply relaxed, at the same time alert. And what could soften or let go right now? And what could soften or let go even more? And if you like, in the remaining time, you might lengthen the in-breath just a little bit. And on the exhalation, relax. Let the breath just fall out of your body. Gentle inhalation, conscious softening, relaxing on the out-breath. Just notice the quality of presence right now. If you could name your inner felt sense of here and now, what words would you use to describe your experience? And can you let this be? And now, as you deepen your breath a little more, you might let your head drift a little bit to the left and to the right, just sensing the movement from the inside. Let your body respond in any way that feels good. Take this time for your transition, moving in any way that feels most pleasurable to you. It brings you back to a sense of here and now. You might like to reach your arms overhead. And welcome. It's a story I heard a good while back that really triggered something for me. And it's the story of this guy who sadly lost his father. And as he was at the funeral, afterward, he was getting a lot of the "I'm so sorry" handshakes. The two-handed handshakes. Where you shake someone's hand, and you put your hand on top. and then cut them in the receiving line. Many people would come up and express their sympathy, their empathy, and kind of give them this two-handed handshake and kind of move on. And about 3 weeks later, he's a business guy, and he had just completed a project and closed a deal. It was a really, really big deal for the company. And the CEO of the company came up to him to express his gratitude, and he shook his hand, and he put his other hand on top, gave him the two-handed handshake, and just said, "You did an amazing job. Thank you so much." And then later that day, he couldn't understand why he was feeling so sad. And then he realized that two-handed handshake that his boss gave him had sort of triggered some somatic awareness of the funeral and the loss of his father. And I find that so interesting. That sort of somatic anchor, if you will, of the two-handed handshake, even though it was in congratulations, brought up all these memories of sadness. So that really got me thinking, how does this play into mindfulness? And how does it play into inquiry and intuition, this experience of the body, these anchors in the body? And it really got me thinking, like, if that two-handed handshake could trigger sadness just through like a somatic awareness, what else is encoded in the body? How much of our lives is responding to these kind of unconscious inner experiences we've had through the senses? So we're continuing our theme of exploring this art of listening within, the art of inquiry, the power of questions. And 4 things I'd like to explore. One is to kind of review what is the goal of this practice? Why are we meditating? Second, why do we include the body in this practice? Why is the body so important? Third, I'd like to talk a little bit about the art of somatic inquiry. How do you use the body as a way of really exploring the experience of reality? And then fourth, how can you use your body as a tuning fork for truth? And you can, which is really, really cool. So, the goal of meditation. Why do we meditate? I don't know if this is true. I heard this story a long time ago, but supposedly what I heard, and I like the story, Pema Chodron, who, as you well may know, is one of the most beloved meditation teachers on the planet right now. She was asked a long time ago, "What got you started meditating?" And she said, "Oh, I hated my husband." And for me, what got me started meditating was kind of the same sort of trigger. Not that I hated my husband, I was 15, but I was pretty unhappy. Long story short, but I had a very powerful kind of mystical awakening when I was really young, like 7 or 8. And with that experience was just this sense of dropping away of self and kind of opening to this very powerful non-dual experience. It was a searing experience. And after that experience, we're just looking and looking and looking, how do I get back there? So when I was 15, and to be totally honest, I did some chemical research when I was 15, which gave me a very powerful glimpse. Again, that sense of like the mystery of life, the conditioned self falling away and opening to a greater sense of reality. It was amazing to me. And again, it brought up that sense of there has to be more to life than just this experience of the mind. So I was living in a boarding school at that time. I was 6'5" and about 145 pounds. And I grew up on a farm. So here I was at this boarding school with people who were a lot more sophisticated socially than me. People who actually played organized sports when they were kids. People who were kind of socially well adjusted as opposed to me as this little farm boy. I'm so lucky, I'm so grateful that I had an experience when I was 15. I went to my first yoga class. And during the yoga nidra, the lying down practice, I felt that shift from the linear, rational mind to like a greater sense of presence. And then I learned Transcendental Meditation, which is mantra meditation. That experience, when I felt that shift of using, in this case, the anchor of sound, internalized sound, that sort of guided me back to a sense of here and now, where I was relaxed and alert, was really powerful. And I just knew, I had this internal knowing, I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. And so far, I have. What arose out of that experience was a sense of presence. And as I practiced and I became a very dedicated practitioner, a greater sense of presence, more confidence, more creativity, less anxiety. It was incredibly powerful. And from there, I found just a few friends who were interested in meditation. I practiced through high school, I practiced through college. I lived on a community of meditators when I was in college, through the Peace Corps, living in an ashram all these years, taking retreats, leading retreats, teaching teachers. It's been an ongoing process of amazing discovery, this whole practice of meditation. And I'm really reminded how, in this practice, James Barris is a really wonderful teacher who's been teaching for a really, really long time. He's led month-long retreats and sat retreats. He said once at the end of a month-long retreat, in silence and practicing really deeply, he said, there are times when I feel like I just have my fingernails in the iceberg of understanding. And I love that. I love that sharing because it kind of gives me permission to not know the answers, to appreciate the mystery, to really love the mystery. And as I've shared before, to get really comfortable with what I don't know. So it's an interesting question. What sparked your interest in meditation? What is it that called you to this practice? I am incredibly grateful. And this practice completely shifted the trajectory of my life. And part of my life is about sharing what this practice can do for you and for others. And I really appreciate how we are all drawn to this practice for different reasons. Some of us are just feeling that general sense of unhappiness, dissatisfaction, unsteadiness of mind. Some of us are aware that we're stressed and we're looking for stress reduction. Some of us really are working with pretty deep trauma. Some people have just a curiosity. So what is this stuff? Some of us maybe have read about Buddhist philosophy, Buddhist psychology, and have that interest of, well, how do I internalize these teachings that kind of make sense? Ultimately, I think what we share is a desire to see more clearly. Many years ago, there was the yoga wave. No one knew what yoga was. Back when I was living in a yoga ashram, you talk about yoga, they thought you were talking about yogurt. And now we're kind of in the mindfulness wave. And it's fascinating to see kind of the commercialism of it. Yoga has certainly become commercialized. But at its essence, I feel that the goal of the practice can be described in a couple different ways. Ultimately, it's about being happy. And it's the happiness that's not dependent on externals, that deep internal happiness that can't be touched. The other way I like to think of it is to see more clearly into the nature of reality. And so the question is, if the goal is to be more happy, to see more clearly into the nature of reality, how do we do it? So, and here what we're really kind of exploring is why the body is so critical in this particular strain of meditation, of insight meditation or vipassana meditation. Some traditions are they're not so embodied. Mantra meditation is it's a different approach. It still falls under the category of calming through concentration, having an anchor, but the anchor is more of a mental technique. But in this tradition, it's very, very much about embodiment. So, gosh, so many years ago, God, getting old. I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, and living in Niger, in the capital city of Niamey. And I taught in a university, and I was very, very big into meditation. And I've shared this before, but when I did my training, I think there were 70 of us, in our training, getting ready to go over. I stood up and I said to the group, everyone is interested in meditation. Let's gather over in that corner. We'll all gather over there in that corner. And we can talk about how we can support each other in our meditation practice. One guy showed up, and he became sort of my meditation buddy all through those years. I'm really, really grateful. But everyone kind of knew I was big into meditation. And this little Swami came into town, and all he had was, he was wearing orange, and he had a briefcase. That was it. And he was traveling all around West Africa teaching meditation. And he was from the Ananda Marga tradition. And he kind of showed up at the Peace Corps hostel, and he couldn't stay there because he wasn't a Peace Corps member. But they said, hey, this guy who on the other side of the city, he's really into meditation. Why don't you go visit him? So he showed up at my door, and he stayed with me for about a week. As we talked about meditation, I remember him asking me, he said, where do you focus on the breath? Where do you focus on your anchor? And I said, well, usually I focus at the nostrils. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he said, very bad, very bad. You must focus on the belly. And I smiled. And I really appreciate, how different traditions have different approaches. And as I've shared before, you can find one tradition that will give you one instruction, another that will give you the opposite. But what I appreciate how in meditation, there's a certain rigidity can be helpful because we're training the mind. We're training the mind to be more present, to move from anxiety, worry, judgment, blame, planning, review to here and now. So when I did Transcendental Meditation, very, very strict, 20 minutes twice a day. And if you're doing Ananda Marga, you focus on the belly. Now, these practices, many of them call on concentration, focus as a way of steadying your attention. And then they can open up into investigation, at least in the Vipassana tradition, which really embraces that. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So with all these techniques out there, someone was asked, a teacher was asked, so with all these, if I'm going to meditate, I want to know the best technique. So what's the best technique? And the teacher smiled and said, the best technique is the one you do on a regular basis. It's really kind of a brilliant response. What's interesting is so many traditions will assure you that their technique is the highest and the best. But what I have found for myself, and certainly with others, as I've hung out in this realm of meditation and exploring its effect, your practice will evolve. Your practice will change. At certainty, you'll be drawn to a technique, and you'll find that it really opens up incredible spaces inside. And then you'll notice something else that will perhaps call you. And this, of course, becomes a dance because on the one hand, your practice will evolve, but on the other hand, sometimes you won't enjoy the technique that you're doing because it's working, because it's bringing something up for you to digest that's previously undigested. So it becomes a very interesting element around trusting your own intuition. It was really beautifully summarized by the Buddha in allegedly in his dying words, where he said, "Be a light unto yourself. Do not look for teachers, traditions, or scriptures to tell you what your practice is, but verify these teachings for yourself." It's so powerful. It's up to you to determine what works for you. And so in this tradition, we have the anchor of here and now, the anchor of awareness of the senses. And for many, it's breath. That the breath is easily accessible, it's with you all the time. And if you're aware of, let's say, this next inhalation, you have just taken the mind and brought it to the here and now. Of course, now for some, the breath is too subtle, or perhaps there's some trauma around the breath. And of course, here you can use the anchor of sounds or the anchor of maybe the feeling in the palms. But this very, very powerful practice of breath can bring you back to the here and now. Last weekend, I led a retreat called Every Breath is Sacred, and we explore different techniques and their effect. And maybe we can take just a minute or two to kind of explore a particular form of willful breathing. There are all these ancient breathing techniques that have been around for a really, really long time. And now through functional MRIs and brain studies, we can sort of verify their effectiveness. So this practice of Ujjayi Pranayama or Dirga Pranayama is sort of updated to be called Coherent Breathing. And if you'd like, you can just close your eyes and let's explore what it's like to really bring your attention to your breath. So if you close your eyes, feel the natural flow of your breath and just notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And then if you would, only if this feels right for you, you're going to match the length of the in-breath with the length of the out-breath with no extended pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. And if you would, breathe in slowly to the count of 4, and then exhale to the count of 4. Inhale to the count of 4, and exhale to the count of 4. And just continue on your own for the next few rounds of breath. Now, if you can, is it possible, without creating any strain, to breathe into the count of 5 and exhale to the count of 5? And again, only if it's not creating a strain can you now count to 6. And again, relax. And at the same time, can you simultaneously sharpen your attention to your inner experience? On the next out breath, let the technique fall away. Just feel the effect, feel the imprint. How do you feel right now? If you could describe it in a word or two. If you'd like, you can open your eyes or remain with them closed if that's more comfortable for you. You may have noticed, not necessarily, but you may have noticed that when you're sustaining attention on the experience of the breath on the inside, that there's a heightened awareness of here and now. There's more of a sense of arriving. There can be, not necessarily all the time, but there can be kind of a stabilizing of attention. That the mind is not quite so wild, that wild horse of the mind, galloping into the future, galloping into the past, comparing, commenting. So what do we notice? Well, there are two things here. One is you're noticing what's happening as it's happening. As you breathe in, you're aware of breathing in. As you breathe out, you're aware of breathing out. What you're doing here is you're establishing the sense of the observer. Like you are the one who's aware. So you're noticing what's happening as it's happening, but you're also noticing your relationship to what's happening, which might be, wow, as I'm doing this technique, I'm beginning to feel a sense of inner calm. Or it might be, wow, I kind of like this. I want to remember this. Or it might be like, this is stupid. I'm really not enjoying this. When can we get on to the rest of this? So you're noticing your relationship to what's going on. Now, what happens here is the more you develop this sense of the witness, this impartial observer of your experience, there's a natural widening of awareness beyond just that raw data of sensation in the here and now. We touched on this briefly before, but it's important. It's one of the primary things to be aware of. It's the four foundations of awareness. What is it that you are aware of when you pay attention? Well, one is your awareness of the body. You're aware of the body. You're aware of the sensations, the raw data of energy, feeling, pulse, tingling, vibration. You're aware of life force here and now. You're also aware of what we could call a feeling tone. That raw data of sensation is interpreted by your brain as either pleasant, unpleasant, or in between, the neutral. And you're also aware of the reactivity to that feeling tone. If it's unpleasant, it's going to kick off certain thoughts. I don't like this. I want to make this go away. If it's pleasant, how do I keep this going? How can I grow this? I want to remember this. This is really cool. If it's neutral, it's neither pleasant nor unpleasant, then the mind is like, oh God, this is so boring. And out of that awareness of mind comes the whole proliferation of thoughts and commentary and memory and forecasting into the future. The fourth foundation is a really interesting one. It's very, very subtle. But it's all here available to us when we are relaxed and alert. It's referred to as awareness of the Dhammas, or like awareness of the truths. And one way to think of this is you become more aware of the kind of the collection of thoughts, or the collection of internal experiences. For example, you might become aware of, the 5 obstacles in practice. Like, oh my gosh, here are these experiences that occlude present moment awareness. I'm aware of wanting it different. I'm aware of anger, judgment, blame. I'm aware of sleepiness. I'm aware of restlessness and worry. I'm aware of self-criticism. I'm aware of doubt. You suddenly become aware of these qualities of mind. You might even become aware of kind of the nature of how things arise. Oh my gosh, I'm really aware that unsteadiness is kind of part of my experience. And if I look really closely, that wherever any unsteadiness is and wherever any unhappiness is, that there's some kind of holding on, there's some kind of inability to let go. And wow, I'm aware that when I do let go, there's space. And now I'm really aware that some of these practices and teachings really kind of make sense. And this is where we open up into all the beautiful lists that are part of this practice. The 4 Noble Truths, the 5 Hindrances, the 7 Factors of Awakening, on and on and on. Now, all of this, again, is available through this doorway of paying attention to the here and now in the senses. And I've shared about this a lot, but I still love this. Sort of this chain of causality. If the foundation is undifferentiated energy, it's just life force, it's tingling, pulse, sensation, vibration. And then there's the feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And there's the whole thought process that we build onto that. And if you're not aware of your thoughts and you think the same thought 5,000 times, that thought will calcify into a belief. If you're not aware of the beliefs in your life, they will form your habits. And if you're not aware of the habits in your life, they form your character. And if you're not aware of your character, that becomes your destiny. So we can hang out on any one of these levels. You can explore your sense of destiny. You can explore your character. You can look at your habits. You can examine your beliefs. You can look at your thoughts. And you can look at your relationship to the feeling tone and this kind of proliferation that comes out of reactivity to the moment. And you can come back to the here and now, which is why we're guided back to this moment, this breath. There's this whole concept of proliferation, and Pali is referred to as papancha. And it's like one little ping can open up an entire internal conversation. I hear a bird song outside. And suddenly I go into thoughts of how much I like to camp. And then it'll go into the memory of when I was 13 and in the National Boundary Waters canoe area. And then it goes into a sense of sadness that I haven't been back, on and on and on. We can get lost in that proliferation. And, we could say we've been lost in that proliferation most of our lives. So back to the breath, back to the here and now, is moving from the mental state to the embodied state. This is so simple and so incredibly deep. As is said by Christ, allegedly, all you seek is found within. The Buddha said, within this body, I declare you can understand the creation of the cosmos and the cessation of the cosmos. Everything you want to know can be found within. So, what does this have to do with inquiry? What does this have to do with the power of questions? Well, the short answer is a lot. It's got a lot to do here. So, in the past, I have been part of leading lots of long retreats, lots of intensive retreats. When stuff comes up, it's an opportunity for me to kind of work with folks around this practice of investigation. One element of practice is calming. It's the concentration, the steadying practice. But in this practice of vipassana and mindfulness, when something very strong arises, you can move from your anchor to explore, wow, what is this? And for me, it's been very, very powerful. I'm a head-oriented person. I pretty much assumed the only reason I had a body was to make my head portable. But through my exploration of yoga and meditation, I've come to realize this is the doorway. So I was exploring with someone who was on retreat. And in our interview, he was sharing how incredibly restless he was in his meditation, incredibly agitated. And he was very restless and very agitated before the retreat. Snapping at his kids, snapping at his partner, being really judgmental. And he was also feeling a lot of pain, a lot of back pain going on. And as he was aware that he was getting worried. He really didn't like his job anymore. He wasn't sure what was next. And so I asked him a question. I said, so what's between you and feeling free in your life right now? What's going on is between you and feeling free? And he thought about that and he said, well, his job. He worked with his brother and he had a lot of conflict with his brother. and the employees were getting frustrated because they weren't getting along, and there was kind of conflicting management styles, and that was really, really, really bothering him. There were there were family issues and frustrations with his partner. As his kids were getting older, he didn't like the decisions his kids were making, and there was kind of like power struggles. And then there was this whole thing with his back, and he just wasn't feeling that well, his health, because he didn't know what was going on. It was really, really worrying him. And so I invited him to do a little somatic inquiry, a little investigation. And I said, so when you feel kind of when you feel all of the totality of this, the challenge with work and the family issues and your health, when you feel all of this, what is that like on the inside? Now it's really, really interesting, and I'll talk more about this, but as you may have heard the phrase, your issues are in your tissues. What you think, what you feel, it lives on the inside. Every emotion is a psychobiological event. It's in the mind, but it's also inside if you look. Where we tend to feel the most is through the midline and the core, the eyes, the throat, the heart, the belly. So when I invited him to think about the totality of this, and again, I think he was pretty sensitized because he was on a retreat, that he could just feel this closing down in his chest. He'd say like, oh, I just feel this gripping in my chest. And it almost feels like I'm going to have a heart attack. Now, one of the things that's important as we explore through these two lenses of seeing clearly and also calling on loving presence is to really ask if it feels okay, because sometimes it doesn't. It can be traumatizing too much, or you feel flooded. And so I said, does it feel okay? Does it feel safe to kind of be with these sensations? He goes, yeah, with you here, it feels okay. Feeling this gripping. And I asked him to describe what it felt like. One of the ways when you're exploring somatic inquiry is to imagine as if you were describing it to someone else so they could recreate the same sensations. So he kind of described the shape and the color and the quality of the gripping, and it was like a really tight, pulsing, gripping feeling. And I asked him if that grip in his heart, if there was an emotional word that sort of resonated with that feeling. He said, this is anger. And so I said, well, let's validate that. Does the word anger resonate with the feeling? And he goes, no, that's not it. He said, maybe this is revenge. And I said, well, let's validate that. Does the word revenge resonate with that feeling? He goes, no, that's not it either. He said, oh, you know what? I know what this is. I said, so what word resonates? He goes, this is sadness. I said, so again, let's check that out. Can you verify that? Does the word sadness resonate with the feeling, that felt sense inside? I said, no, that's not it either. We sat with it for a while longer. And then the expression on his face changed. And the tears just began to flow. He said, this is grief. I don't have anyone to talk to. I've been holding all of this in for a really, really long time. I've been putting up this front that it's okay. But it's not. It's all falling apart. I asked him what he needed. What was he wanting? What was he hoping for? And he said, no one gives me a break. Everyone's angry with me. I said, well, you know what? That actually makes sense because I'm angry with them. What I'm doing to everyone around me, they're just doing it right back. And what I really need is just to give myself a break. And so I asked him, I said, if you could just give yourself a break right now, if you could just hold this in some kind of loving presence, if you could offer this some empathy or kindness, what do you feel? What do you notice on the inside? And he began to describe this softening. Tears continued to flow, his face softened, and I invited him to kind of track that felt shift, to kind of feel what it feels like on the inside, to really bring some genuine loving presence, some empathy, some kindness to this. And for a long time, he just sat there and kind of described this feeling of letting go, this feeling of softening, of expansion, a greater sense of ease. And after a while, I asked him another question. I said, what advice do you have to give yourself right now, given what you've felt, what you've named, what shift? And he said, be honest. So I need to own up to this. I need to tell my partner what's going on. I know he's concerned and he's worried about me. And I need to start taking care of myself. Then I asked him another question. I said, what if you did that? What if you did own up to this and tell your partner what's going on and start taking care of yourself? Not perfectly, not all the time, but what if you inclined your awareness toward really doing this? What would that be like? What would that feel like? He said it would be so much easier. So after a while, he just sat quietly and kind of acknowledged what a journey that was for him. And you might recall some of the questions. Again, we're talking about inquiry and the power of questions. I asked him, what's between you and feeling free? And he sort of named kind of the landscape of what was going on. And sometimes naming it can be a way of releasing it. Sometimes you name something, you realize, wow, that's really sticky. I also asked him when he kind of felt the totality of it, if he could feel it on the inside, or if he could locate it. And as he sat with it, as he made room for it, one of the main questions, there were a number of questions I asked, but one was a question around the unmet need, which is such a powerful question. What were you hoping for? What were you wanting that hasn't happened? Naming that is such a powerful and vulnerable question, but it brings us back to the wound. And as he explored that, another question I asked was, given what you've named and what you've felt and what may have shifted, what advice do you have to give yourself? And that calls on higher wisdom. I'm always amazed when I ask that question, what advice do you have to give yourself? How quickly and readily people access that. And then asking, if you were to do that, not perfectly, what would that feel like on the inside? I am aware of how our time has flown. There was so much more I wanted to explore here, but let me say just a few more things. As you explore this practice of inquiry, embracing the body as a tuning fork for what's true is amazing. I've studied this whole discipline of focusing, which was sort of founded by Dr. Eugene Gendlin. And as he was exploring, like, what are the most powerful transformational tools? One of the famous stories he tells, that was where the light came on for him, Was he observing someone doing in a kind of a therapeutic situation? And the person said, I'm so angry with my sister. And then she closed her eyes. There was a long pause, and she said, that's not it. I'm really disappointed with my sister. And the light bulb came on for him, and he thought, what just happened? Here's a story. I'm really angry with my sister. But then she closed her eyes and she checked in with her body. That wasn't the right word. She was disappointed. So again and again, we come back to this sense of this classic teaching of the line. Above the line is what you're aware of. Below the line is what's unfelt, unseen. When you relax, when you pay attention, when you tune in to your body, to the felt sense, the line moves. You start to feel things. You start to notice things you hadn't felt or noticed before. And this practice of resonance, of verifying with the body, becomes an amazing feedback tool. It becomes an amazing, really kind of an amazing thing. Do the words resonate? If you ask yourself right now, what would be most nourishing? What would be the most kind thing you could do for yourself when this talk ends in a few minutes? You might just sense, what would that be? And then if you check back in with the felt sense of your body, does that resonate? Does that feel right? It might not. But an interesting thing to try on, it's still hypothetical, is the concept that the body doesn't lie. Again, just like the Buddha said, don't believe a word of what I'm telling you. You have to verify this for yourself. But it can be a very interesting thing to try on. When you have a choice in front of you, take a moment to pause and check in with the felt sense of your body. Does that resonate? And you may find, as you develop this sense of kinesthetic intuition, using your body as a tuning fork, that you may find that this can be a really powerful tool as you navigate your way along here. So there's so much more to explore here around the fine-tuning of developing kinesthetic intuition. I'll be sharing more in the near future, really talking about this model of how to create the optimal environment for doing this inner work of listening inward, and how you can draw on the incredible wisdom of the body, these ancient teachings of mindfulness, to apply them in incredibly pragmatic and practical ways that can not only help you make decisions, time-bound decisions, but can also point your attention towards seeing more clearly into the nature of reality. I hope this was helpful. I really get off on this stuff, and it's really nice to share it with you. Thank you so much. Many, many blessings and happy trails.